Hello, my beloved art sluts. Welcome to Artgasm, the podcast all about sex, art, and pop culture and all the sexy permutations they can get into trouble with. I'm your host, Allison Moon. I'm a sex educator, I'm a writer, and, the voice that is seeping into your ear holes right now. I'm so happy you could join us on today's episode. I am thrilled with our guest, Jason Porath, the creator of one of the coolest projects I've encountered in a number of years called Rejected Princesses. Rejected Princesses, he'll tell you all about it, but it's this amazing experience where you can learn about unsung women throughout history. And he illustrates the stories, he researches so in depth, and he shares with us stories of women you've never heard of, or deeper versions of stories of women you thought you knew all about. And I love my conversation with Jason. He and I have been friends for a number of years, and he always just dazzles me with his intelligence, his compassion, and his commitment to really amazing creative projects. So stay tuned for our conversation coming up in just a couple minutes. Before I get to that, though, I want to let you know. So Girl Sex 101, I've been plugging it at the top of pretty much every episode. Well, here's the thing, yo. We have 2 copies left. Two literal copies left. One of them you can buy. Some lucky person can rush over to girlsex101.com and buy it. The other one, I'm holding on to it. Why am I holding on to it? I'm holding on to it because I'm going to do a contest. Yeah. I figure, why not give away a copy? That sounds fun, right? So here's how this works. I'm going to give away a copy, the last color copy of Girl Sex 101 paperback ever. I'm going to sign it. I'm going to add a sticker. I'm also going to add a couple of other goodies. I'm going to add samples of Uberlube. Uberlube's an amazing silicone lubricant. They have sponsored me in the past in various ways, and I love their product. And I'm going to give you a limited edition letterpress bookmark that I actually had printed for the very first release of Girl Sex 101 these many years ago. So if you want a letterpress bookmark, and I might throw in a couple of other things. I don't know. So here's how this works. First of all, it's only open to people in the United States. I know, I'm sorry. Shipping internationally, especially for a book as heavy as Girl Sex 101, is just prohibitively expensive. So it's only going to be for my downtrodden, desperate American brethren right now, and sistren right now. So US-based people, you can enter in one of 2 ways, all right? You can leave a review of Artgasm. You can do it on any of the platforms where you listen to it that allow reviews. Apple Podcasts / iTunes is probably the place to do it. But if there's another place where you can leave a review, that's great. So leave a review and then screenshot it and email it to me at artgasmcast@gmail.com. That's artgasmcast@gmail.com. Don't forget the cast. That's important. Okay, that's one way you can do it. That's a super helpful way you can do it. The second way you can enter to win this book is by going to Twitter and tweeting your favorite quote from any episode of the podcast so far. We are on episode number 11 now, so any of the first 11 episodes, tweet your favorite quote from any episode with a link to that episode, right? And you have to hashtag it because I need to be able to find it. So you're going to use the hashtag ArtgasmCast. All right. Don't forget the cast, Artgasmcast, so that I can find it. So I will be following that hashtag, and I will choose someone from one of those 2 things. You have until July 24th, which is when the next episode comes out. I will remind you on the next episode, hey, this is the last day to get your thing in. So you have until July 24th. So hopefully if you're one of those people who doesn't listen to podcasts every day, if you kind of bank them and listen to them later, you'll have until July 24th to do one of those 2 things, either leave a review or tweet your favorite quote and hashtag it. All right. And then I will choose one person from that list. Now, I want to be perfectly clear. You do not have to leave a glowing review. You do not have to quote my favorite person from my favorite episode. It's not about my preference. It's about y'all engaging with the podcast. So one of those 2 things, leave a review, tweet your favorite quote, link to the podcast, and hashtag it. And then I will choose one of you, and I will send you the book with the lube samples, maybe with a fun toy, if I can find a fun free toy among my things that I hold on to for when I want to give away fun things, because I'm a sex educator and get free sex toys because I chose a career wisely. So yeah, one of those two things. That's the way to do it. Now, again, to be clear, the black and white version will exist forever and ever. Amen. You have no problem buying the book on Amazon, on Girl Sex 101, anywhere you want to get the book, you can get the book. But the color version, it's just so damn pretty. I also do have hardcover limited edition on really fancy paper books that I was selling for $50. So if you are like, oh, I missed my opportunity, you can still get like one of the schmancy versions. Those still exist. They're hand numbered by me. All the fun stuff. You actually get the letterpress bookmark included as well. If you want to poke around on my website and see what that looks like, girlsex101.com/store is the way to do it. All right. So as the hair dye settles into my follicles, I am preparing for my summer due. Now that it is good and hot and dry here in the Pacific Northwest, I have cut off all my hair. I was trying to be a femme. It did not work. It was a failed experiment, and that's just fine. I've always been pretty soft butch, and I've always had pretty short hair because hair length and gender presentation are not necessarily correlated. However, I do find that I was trying to be a little bit more femme for the past couple of years. I was like trying to see what it would look like on me. And you know what? It didn't work. I am somebody who just looks better with short hair, and I have to accept that about myself. So I've cut off all my hair. It felt very good. It felt very liberating. And I've returned to my, pun intended, roots. And it feels real good. It feels real summery. I feel ready to go swimming and put some lemon juice in my hair to get those natural highlights that I've been doing since I was probably about 10 years old. I'm ready for summertime. And you know what? Who should be ready for summertime? Literally everyone in the Northern Hemisphere. It has gotten so damn hot, so damn fast. We are breaking records for highest temperature on record in like every region of the Northern Hemisphere right now, because climate change is real. Who'd have thunk, other than literally every scientist in the world. So, okay, speaking of learning from history, speaking of listening to research, speaking of academic rigor and the value therein, allow me to introduce you to Jason Porath. So, as I said, Jason Porath created this really amazing project called Rejected Princesses. He's going to tell you all about it. But the gist of it, I mean, you can check it out by going to rejectedprincesses.com. You can follow along. He's going to drop some names, some of the names that might be hard for average folk to spell. So every time he mentions a name of a famous or infamous person from history, I've written their name in the show notes. So if you're like, how does one spell Amelia Earhart's last name? How does one spell Toregene Khatun? How does one spell any of these names? You can go check out the show notes. You can always see show notes at artgasmcast.com. That's where you can also listen to the podcast. And I think what my favorite part about what Jason does with his work is he represents women as whole human beings. We're not just action girl. We're not just strong female movie star. We're not just any of these very single dimension myopic kind of trope characters. These are all women from myth and from history that were whole people. And they were whole people in that they were jerks, and that they were badasses, and that they were heroes, and that they were warriors, and that they were mothers, and that they were all these different aspects of human beings that are so minimized, especially when we look through the lens of history at individuals. We want to see people all as heroes or villains. We want to see them as victims or victimizers. We want to see them as predator or prey. We have this very binary thinking these days about people, about these categories that humans fit into. And I find it so troubling and so exhausting. And it's equally true for whether you want to see somebody as capital B bad or capital G good, that we're not all one thing. And that if you can experience trauma and still be a jerk, and you can be somebody who creates trauma in somebody and still be a good person, these are not mutually exclusive categories. This is what it is to be a human being. And this is what I love about Jason's work, is that he'll talk about the ugly with the good. He'll talk about how somebody has changed the course of history for the better, and also maybe was kind of a jerk to her family. right? This is human beings, and one of the most damaging stereotypes about women is that we're the kind of these especially around white women, is that we're these virtuous, innocent people, and that there's no wrong that we can do, and that we need to be protected and preserved, right? It's not even childlike; it's fictional ideas of what women are and can be. And so we talk a lot about that. And so please stay tuned. Enjoy. I will be back at the end of the interview with a couple more little announcements. But in the meantime, please enjoy my conversation with Jason Porath. Cool.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
How's it going, Jason?
It's going all right. How are you?
I'm doing all right. It's nice to be in gloomy Burbank today.
I know, right? Like, we're supposed to have really awesome weather, and then, like, every time I've had people visit, I'm just like, normally it's better than this.
I swear. I think there's a senior citizen couple in front of me on the plane who's like, oh, it's so smoggy. I'm like, no, those are just clouds.
Yeah, that's just actual clouds this time.
Clouds, yeah. Anyway, so I'm so excited to sit down with you for Artgasm because I have been a fan of your work since before I actually knew you.
What? Really?
Yeah, but it was a weird thing where I was like, this Rejected Princesses thing is so cool. And then I think like 3 months later, Sex Nerd Sandra was like, hey, Rejected Princesses is this really cool thing that was made by my friend. I'm like, and it became this wonderful little kismet of, I met the person who created this stuff like through my girlfriend like 2 months after I heard about it. It was really fun. So yeah. So how long has the project been going at this point?
About 4 years. I left DreamWorks. I just hit the 4-year anniversary of leaving DreamWorks, like my last day there, which I got a little verklempt, a little choked up over. And I gave myself about 2 months to just sort of unspool, and then I posted like an imager gallery. I did like 12 of them to launch, and it was just sort of a lark to see if anybody would be interested in this. Mm-hmm. And then it went viral, and that's been my life ever since. So,
wow.
Right around 4 years now.
Had you been working on it before you left DreamWorks? Had you been playing with the idea? Wow.
No. I mean, like the extent to which I'd worked on it was it came out of a lunchtime conversation of like, what's the worst idea you can come up with for a Disney princess? And the worst idea we came up with out of that was Nabokov's Lolita, as presented by Disney, which is a really, truly terrible idea.
Well, absent parents and
and
cross-country adventure.
It was such a terrible idea. I had to see it exist in some form or another. So, like, I illustrated it.
Did you really?
Yeah, it was one of the first 12. And then I illustrated a bunch of historical ones because I was, this came out of bullshitting around with my ex-coworkers at DreamWorks, and I kept tossing out historical figures that none of them had ever heard of. I'm like, you've never heard of Boudica? How have you never heard of Boudica?
Yeah.
Like, I get, okay, you don't know about Jingambande, maybe you're not a big, Angola buff, but, like, Boudica? How do you not know about Boudica? So I illustrated all of them, and it kind of took off after that.
Had you been an illustrator at DreamWorks?
Not at all. Really? I didn't know how the hell to draw. Arguably, I still don't. No, my background at DreamWorks is I was a physics animator, for lack of a better term. I was part programmer and a little bit animator. So I did like magic effects or like fire, water, like all the stuff that's like a lot of physics simulations.
Cool.
That fell to me.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I was very left-brained over there. Nobody thought that I was able to actually, nobody thought anybody in our department was able to draw whatsoever. Well,
I think, and this is like my own personal interest. This has nothing to do with necessarily the themes of Artgasm, but I'm fascinated by like how that kind of world of tech is changing, I think, what we consider artists in some way. Like, to be able to code that kind of thing. Or like I have a friend who works for Lucasfilm who does a lot of the stitching together of digital effects. Oh, yeah. So it's basically the frames between the frames, and that's the best way to describe a very complicated concept. But that shit's art. It's gotta be. And I love that it's kind of making us that it's not just about drawing,
Yeah, but it offered like a really fun smoke screen. Actually, can I take an aside to tell you a story that is, I think, a little bit more on brand with like
sure.
the sort of sexuality thing? So this is the first time that I'm talking about this in any way publicly, but I think
scoop. Yeah, I like it.
Think the statute of limitations on this has passed at this point. So there was a DreamWorks movie called Home. It was an alien invasion movie. It starred Rihanna as one of the voices. It hadn't come out yet by the time that I was leaving. And it was still in production. And during production, it had a joke in there. I don't think made it to the final cut, but it was one of the aliens making fun of the humans, being like, "Oh, you puny humans, you think you're so superior. We're so much better because you only have 2 genders, but we have 7."
Nice.
And they list them off, and it was just a sight gag of like a really long line of bathrooms. It was like, so it's like boy, girl, girl, boy, girl, boy, boy, girl, and boy, boy, I think was what they were. And then they never brought it up again in the movie.
Oh my God.
But I had a lot of questions. So it was a thing for people working at DreamWorks to do art shows, and there were little art galleries and whatnot. But I knew I was not being a very good cog for that machine. I was the cynical guy who was bringing everybody down. It was time for me to leave. Right. Like I didn't want being that guy, but. 5-6 years of working on Shrek movies will do that to you. So my final day at work, I did an art show, but it was in a secret room that isn't technically on the map. It's like a hidden bar that's behind a bookshelf.
That's amazing.
Right? All the big animation studios have them. I think Disney has 3 or 4.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it was called I Am Not a Team Player. And it had a lot of art of all of the family-friendly characters at DreamWorks in various horrible positions because I'm a terrible person. But the crowning achievement of all of this was a 32-page fully illustrated sex ed manual for this alien race with 7 genders.
What?
It was called My Boov Myself. It was unbelievably sexually regressive. Because it's so hysterically weird of like, okay, you've got 7 genders and you still have hangups over homosexuality. Right. How's that even a thing?
Sure.
Like I had a matrix in there, like a little grid of like which genders could mate with which genders and who would carry the child in what circumstance. And there was like a diagonal going down saying that like all the same sex ones were forbidden, except for girl on girl, which was forbidden but kind of hot. The whole thing was just intentionally incredibly sexually regressive and incredibly weird. And I had a ball doing it. Yeah, I heard tell that because I left one of the copies because there's a bookshelf that is the entry to the hidden room. Mm-hmm. But nobody thinks of it as a bookshelf because everybody knows that it's secretly a door.
Right.
So it's only outsiders that view it as a bookshelf. So it's remained safe. I have a copy of that stayed on that.
It's still there.
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I had heard that like 6 months to a year after I left, someone really high up there found it and had a real fit. Like was not happy, but couldn't figure out where it came from because no one in my department was supposed to be able to draw.
Oh,
so here's this random thing that's got like, not the pretty decent art at least. And they're just like, who did this?
So he's interrogating all the illustrators and all of the tech guys who say.
But this is like 3-4 years later. Mm-hmm. No harm, no foul.
Sure. You're successful in your own right.
I guess. I hope it's past the statute of limitations. Anyways, yes.
Otherwise,
that's the sort of person I am.
I really kind of don't. Well, I kind of do hope to get an angry letter from a DreamWorks executive to me, but
that would be amazing if there were DreamWorks executives listening to this show. Honestly, most of them have left the company at this point. There's been buyouts and everything, so I don't even know who's still standing who could get upset over that.
There you go. Well, that's the Hollywood statute of limitations. No one's left there to get mad at you anymore.
Exactly. Like I've outlasted their tenures, I guess. I don't know.
Awesome. That is a great story. Thank you for sharing that with me. And now I really want to see that book.
I'll show you later.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so then let's talk about Rejected Princesses. So, I mean, obviously I've been a fan and I've seen it, but for those of you, for those listening at home who don't know what this is, can you give me like the
sure.
elevator speech?
So, Rejected Princesses is a series of illustrations and write-ups about badass women that, mostly from history, occasionally from myth, that you've almost certainly never heard of, or if you have heard of them, I'm covering stuff that you probably don't know about them. They're illustrated in kind of the animated princess style, but they're oftentimes just beheading people or setting things on fire. And I do an enormous amount of research into this. I didn't initially when I started, but I got my feet held to the fire by Angolan Twitter, of all places. Don't mess with Angolan Twitter. and just got a lot more serious about the research. And so it's now 2 different books so far. The first one, just called Rejected Princesses, has 300 some odd citations at the back of the book.
Wow.
Like some serious stuff in there. The second one, which came out recently, called Tough Mothers, is all about history's most badass moms, has another 200 some odd citations at the back of the book.
Wow.
And like, to give you a sense of the level of work that I put into it, there are several entries in Tough Mothers that I'm pretty sure are the most full-featured coverage of certain people in English available.
Wow.
But it kind of looks like a kid's fairy tale book.
Yeah.
So
you probably could have acquire 6 PhDs by now with the amount of dissertations you've written on.
I don't know. I mean, I'm self-taught. That's the thing. I have written the equivalent of a dissertation, but not to this sort of academic rigor, because I'll read everything there is to know about someone, but 1% of it is interesting. So I'm translating a 500-page book into 2 or 3 pages.
Wow.
As I would tell you their story at a party.
Right.
There may be more that I have in footnotes on the website or behind the scenes stuff, but most people are not going to be really interested in that. So I'm just trying to get people as excited about these historical figures as I am.
And so what excites you about these stories then?
They're just they go against the grain, and oftentimes they won. That's the thing, is most of the women that you read about in the history books either lost or had all the edges filed off of them. Amelia Earhart was a polyamorous libertine. She had an open marriage contract that said basically, I'll try and be faithful, but let's be honest, I'm Amelia Earhart and you're Amelia Earhart's husband, so that might not happen.
Right.
Joan of Arc was a terrifying warlord. Ada Lovelace was an opiate addict. Was not a great family member. An unbelievably brilliant woman, but a full-on mad scientist. And I get frustrated when people are just like, oh, look, she was the first, software programmer in all of history, and just whittle off the edges and censor her out. I mean, that's, you start doing that, you go down that road, and you basically get Disney. You get this sort of censored look at things. And when you have all the edges whittled off of history, these women they become unrelatable. They're just up on this pedestal in this ivory tower, and nobody can relate to them. Moreover, because the only thing that's being put out there is this super sanitized vision of femininity. Whereas boys get everybody from Abe Lincoln to Genghis Khan to Winston Churchill. So good, bad, and asshole.
I'm trying to figure out which one's the asshole.
Winston Churchill.
Okay,
Winston Churchill's the asshole. I mean, Genghis Khan was definitely an asshole too. But, boys get everything in between, whereas girls, I mean, my mom grew up without any sort of connection to that lineage, and she thought there was something wrong with her. And I think that is not a solved problem. Even with all the books coming out of just rah girl power, I think there's still a lot of people who have a lot of rough edges who don't see themselves reflected in history.
Right.
And that bugs me. And there's a tremendous pressure to sort of sanitize this off. I have people writing in every single day, why do you have to cuss in this? Why are you covering all this stuff? Why is this so adult? And I'm just because they're people.
Right.
You want me to cover lynching and not say what lynching actually was?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. It does everybody a disservice.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me about Why the Last Man, the comic books. Because I really love that series. I don't know if it's aged particularly well. I haven't revisited it.
I still love it.
Yeah,
They're making a TV series about it now.
They say that, but I don't want to get my hopes up because they've been talking about it for 15 years.
Yeah, that and Sandman. It's just around the corner. It's happening any day now.
But what I loved about the premise of that, and again, as a kind of a baby feminist in college, I think at the time I discovered those books, I remember what was so fascinating about so there's one man left and all these women are trying to get him to try and figure out what the hell's going on and preserve the species. And there's this idea of like what he thought like women would be sitting at the state capitals singing Kumbaya. It's like, no, the Israelis have an army and the Australians have a navy, and these women are going to go to war to get what they want because we're people.
Yeah.
And I think when reading Rejected Princesses helped me feel like, Jesus, these stories aren't told in the right way so often because we make women sound like we are too perfect and too pure to murder, maim, and at this, or go to battle for what we believe in. But women are absolutely capable of that, and throughout history we have been capable of doing despicable or amazing things.
Right.
And we don't get to see those stories in their full glory.
And this is something that really kind of gets to me, because I get a lot of people coming at me with a very moralizing stance on like, why are you holding this woman up on a pedestal, like, but she murdered a bunch of people. I'm just like, okay, but do you get that same way about, Genghis Khan? Like, do you get that way about, Lincoln ended up killing a whole hell of a lot of people. Washington killed a whole hell of a lot of people.
And enslaved many others.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's more leeway for men to have a greater range historically of morality, whereas with girls, it really is the morality police. It feels very wrong to the audience a lot of the time, and people will come at me for that. And the more I've done it, the more I've seen just these tropes of that almost keep women in a box, for lack of a better term. It's there's a great book called The Warrior Queens by Antonia Fraser that sort of gets to the heart of a lot of this. And everything that she brought up in that book, I've seen repeated time and time again. And it's little things that, like the way that they describe a woman's voice as being, melodious or shrill and terrifying.
Right.
And you can hear that in like how we describe like presidential candidates, say.
For example.
You have reputations sexually, being chaste and virginal, or like the devil's own slut, and that's it's a method of control. It really is. One of the people I write about in book 2 that just breaks my heart, but is the most amazing story, is this woman Ada Blackjack. She's this Inuit woman who, poor, uneducated, came from the cities, had a kid with tuberculosis, had been left by her husband, who sullied the good name of Blackjack. like that was that dude's last name, and he left her. Surprise. And so she got hired. She was the only person that actually was brought on this scientific mission to help out this only Inuit person, because everybody else is just like, these white people are crazy. They went to Wrangel Island, which is like this desolate hell pit 200 miles north of Siberia, and they're like, we're gonna sit here for a year and we're gonna claim it in the name of England. England didn't actually want it. They're like, no, we'll do it, and like we'll get fabulous rewards. I'll spare you all the details. Everyone died but her.
Whoa.
Everyone died. She saved the cat. The cat also lived.
That begs the question.
But she was keeping these motherfuckers alive. And she didn't know how to do any of this. They treated her horribly. She had all sorts of mental health issues, and they literally would like tie her up outside.
Oh, Jesus.
And just wait for her to calm down.
Whoa.
And just treat her like crap. So after 2 years on this abandoned island,
wow,
she ends up getting rescued, and then is like, okay, I'm taking my money. I don't want anything to do with you crazy people. I'm going to go like look after my son. That's the only reason I was doing any of this. He's got tuberculosis. Disappears. The dude who rescued her takes the journal of one of the dead guys and ends up basically throwing her under the bus and saying, oh no, she was actually a prostitute that these men brought out, and that she was fat and happy when I picked her up, and just spins this elaborate tale throwing her under the bus as like this temptress.
Wow.
That was just horrible.
Yeah.
Like she had done everything in her power to keep them alive, and she had to she literally came down from Alaska all the way to the LA Times and gave an interview and just burnt down that dude's reputation to the ground. But that's just like one example that I keep running across of just like how sexual reputation is used to sort of as a control.
Sure.
They wanted to control the story and have the life rights and make it more interesting, and they were more than happy to just toss her under the bus.
Sure. Well, shit, that's the stuff still happening.
Yeah, right? But it's been happening all through. Like, I found stuff of Empress Theodora of, like, the Byzantine Empire. Like, there's a historian named Procopius who had serious issues with her, who said that because she had started her life as a prostitute and worked her way up to empress of the Byzantine Empire.
Badass.
Yeah, right? And had done a lot of stuff for sex workers. And he had such an issue with her that he made up stories that you can read about her, like, her head would detach from her body. Her body would then, like, consort with devils, and her head would fly around causing earthquakes and, like, screaming at people in the night.
Damn.
Yeah, he had issues. It's been going on forever.
That's what I really like about you, is that your attention to, like, academic rigor is pretty amazing. I think one of my favorite things I see you post on social media, I don't remember which site, but you tend to post sometimes, like, your library book stacks, which is, like, the most esoteric shelfies I've ever seen. So, like, did you already always have that excitement for history, or did that come from investigating the stories?
I guess I more get excited for esoteric knowledge in general. Like, I have the same sort of love of finding weird abandoned places around LA that almost nobody else knows about, or, like, around the world. Just esoteric, strange knowledge. And so, yeah, it just, it has more of a focus with the princess thing. But, you know, I could tell you all about, like, the Tunguska event, or, like, Mongolian death worms, like, all sorts of really strange things that just Esoterica.
Awesome. So, I mean, what I find interesting is, like, obviously you're a cisgender man, and you write a lot of these stories about women. Right. And I have to wonder, like, has your vigorous research changed the way you perceive women or feminist movements or any sort of kind of ideas around women?
I mean, it's given me a lot more to think about, for one thing. I will say the main thing that it's changed, and something that I'm eternally grateful for, is that it's signaled to a lot of people in my life that I'm someone that they feel they can trust in a more palpable way. And because of that, people I've known almost my entire life, people I've known longer than I haven't, have shared stuff with me that they never had before. Like, I thought I knew them very well. I thought they felt that they could talk to me about anything. But since I started this, it's really deepened friendships, and I've learned a whole lot more about people. And that's the thing that really haunts me, the idea that if I hadn't done this, would I have ever really known my friends? And that's when I see dudes online getting very defensive or really kind of crappy towards women who are putting themselves out on a limb, doubting people, like in the Me Too movement or whatever. The way that I've interfaced with men like that has been to say, look, what you are signaling to people in your life is that you are someone that cannot be trusted. That when someone in your life has real need of you, you've just signaled to them that they can't trust you, and that you will live your entire life only half knowing those around you. That's a haunting idea.
Wow. That's deep.
That's been my experience.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember that was I think somebody had tweeted something profound, as sometimes happens on the thing, but it's very similar to that, where it's just like, you know, if you think that you don't know a woman who's been sexually assaulted, it just means that they don't trust you with the story.
Right. and like all estimates of how common it is, I think, are low.
Wow. I mean, I think for me personally, I guess, when I started college again, awakened me to a lot of different things. I just started, I got angry at the patriarchy once I understood, right? Like, oh, hey, this is a thing that's affecting lives. And now it's certainly started happening with me around colonialism and all these things as I'm exposed to it as a cisgender white woman. So I wonder, like, do you just sometimes like throw up your hands and be like, patriarchy?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, at the same time, it's the water I swim in. It's like it's the only water I've ever known.
Yeah.
The only water I think any of us have ever known. So at a certain point, like it feels a little bit like old man yells at cloud. Right. It's like, well, it's there. I just have to learn to keep trying to shovel out water from the boat and try and dream of something different, try and research, instances where it has been different, prove that this isn't the only world that's possible, and try and make inroads towards making another world possible. I try not to get just paralyzed with rage, although God knows that's really difficult in this day and age.
Golly, yeah.
But it's just not a particularly useful outlet for my energies. One thing that has been useful for my time being basically a software engineer is that when in doubt, I sort of default to the left brain mode of like, is this useful? Is this a useful, expenditure of energy? No, move on.
That's a good life skill.
It's not foolproof. I mean, definitely when people say really nasty things to me on the net, like that just sticks around in my brain forever.
Sure.
I can still like verbatim recall about half the nasty troll messages I've ever gotten, and I've gotten them almost every single day for the past 4 years.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean that kicks around, but you learn to deal with it. And honestly, my skin was that much thinner for being a cishet white dude. Like I didn't ever have to deal with any of this stuff. Whereas, women have to deal with this in various forms almost every single day of their lives. I just didn't have any antibodies. So it was a little bit of being dumped in the deep end. But like I still have it easier than like I continually imagine like what sort of responses would I have gotten were I a woman working on this?
Well, it's almost interesting because like part of me expects that you may have gotten them worse because you're a man and people think you're virtue signaling or you're trying to pull one over or something, like the very cynical read on what you're doing. Yes,
I absolutely get people like that. There was just a little bit ago, someone had posted up a really fascinating article about a 16-year-old horse thief from 1922 named Veneida Smith. And I was just fascinated. And I did a deep dive. I found every single newspaper article I could, everything that I possibly could about it. And then posted it up, and I know the link of like, this whole thing started from this tweet, blah, 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 blah. Here's all I found. Another dude on Twitter found this, and like, here's, all the stuff that I know. I wasn't able to find their obituary. I don't know anything about that. That's what I got. And someone called me out for only linking to the original tweet and not saying the person's name specifically, and then accused me of stealing her research. The original tweet came from a woman named Katie Henry, KT_NRE on Twitter. And I had it corrected in 5 minutes. Like, I have a running list of corrections on my website. Like, I'm a fallible human being. And honestly, I was just writing this at 7 a.m. before I needed to get on a bus to go to San Francisco. It wasn't like an intentional thing. It was like, whoops, I slipped up. Okay, here, it's fixed. That's it. But this woman who I'd met before and I'd had a positive interaction with, and like even given her some free swag, it had been like she'd been just waiting for me to slip up, like waiting for her suspicion that I was a wolf in sheep's clothing to come true. And like the way she phrased it was really harsh. It was like, maybe your next book will be about all the women whose work you've stolen.
Oh, Jesus.
And I I replied, and I'm just like, oh, thanks for letting me know. I've corrected it. Here's a before and after to prove posterity. If you see anything else, and I've gone and corrected it on everything I am able to on mobile. If you have other corrections or you see anything that you think isn't right, please let me know. I have a running list of corrections. I'm more than happy to credit you for corrections. Apologies to KTNRE on Twitter. And, I have a huge list of citations at the end of all my work. I hope it doesn't come off as like me stealing from people. I'd say in the beginning that I'd stand on the shoulders of giants. I'm just the dude doing book reports, essentially. And she kind of was like, okay, I accept it this time.
Oh, jeez.
And I'm like, I don't know what I did to you. That, like, I don't know what experiences you've had. I don't know. It may not be about me. I don't want to assume that. But yeah, those are the voices that I hear in my head pretty much all day, every day. Those are the things I talk about with my therapist. I know that I will never be trustworthy to some people, and there's not anything I can do about that except try and be a good person through actions and not take it personally when people get upset at me for stumbling.
So, I mean, what then? I mean, obviously, it did not. The Rejected Princesses did not come out of the womb fully formed and making you money, right?
No.
So, what about this project kind of keeps you going, even in the face of a lot of doubt or trolling or whatnot?
Well, I talked a little bit before about how there's just not this link to this common lineage that a lot of women are cut off from, and like one of those women was my mom. To describe my mom, my mom for the first couple anniversaries with my stepdad got a chainsaw, flamethrower, and a power scythe. My mom is the most badass woman in the world. I have 7 brothers and no sisters. My mom raised all of us. There was a summer where all of us were home. She had to have been in her late 50s at this point. There were 4 of us boys at home, and we were all in college or thereabouts. She decided she was going to reshingle the roof and not let any of us help. We kept being like, Mom,
you have 7 sons.
It is now time to move into the evil overlord phase of your life. And she's like, and we were like, let us help. And she's like, no, you wouldn't do as good a job. She was right. But Mom, despite all of this, grew up in Kentucky in the 50s, which is not exactly a great place for really smart women, and was told repeatedly that men don't want a smart woman. She was a cheerleader. She married someone on the football team. None of this was her, but she just felt like an aberration, like there was something wrong with her. When she hit her mid-30s, she... her life just started taking off. She divorced her first husband, kind of left this world that didn't have any place for her, had no support for her behind, found Mensa, found some people that were really just smart and amazing, and started flourishing, became a published author. Art was taking off. She was making her own money. All doors were opening to her. And my mom is intense. I will never be as smart as my mom. And it's at that point in her mid-30s when all doors were opening to her that she had to choose, okay, well, now that I can be anything, what do I really want to be? And she chose to be my mom. Now, I know this was a choice. She will never admit this. I was not expected. My mom was not supposed to be able to have children. That's why she didn't have any kids with her first husband. And I know my parents, I know my dad was not, I don't think my dad was prepared to be a dad. I don't think that he was really expecting it and was worried that he wouldn't be a good dad. And I know my mom thinks everything through. My mom is a planner. I know this was a discussion. And my mom never looked back on it. My mom never questioned it. But I did, like, a lot. I would see little glimpses of who my mom was before me. Like, I don't dance like a straight dude because my mom was a belly dancer and she taught me to dance a little bit. I'm not an actual accomplished belly dancer, but when I do dance, it's all like hips and shoulders and like it's a little weird, but that's, you know, one of the things that my mom did. I would see her books on the shelf and, you know, be like, oh, mom had a whole life before me. That just took a hard left when I came along. And I know that she never questioned it, and she always was very proud of me, but I don't know. It came to a point of I felt like I needed to pay her back to some degree, and I can't go back in time and help my mom when she was 13, 14, 15, but this book could help someone who was in my mom's position at that age when they felt like they were an aberration, that there was something wrong with them, that there'd never been anyone in history like them. So that's what kept me going. Initially, the series was kind of silly black humor, like Nabokov's Lolita as done by Disney. There's not a lot to that.
Right.
But I kept on going because it was really important to a lot of people, and it was important to my weird sense of cishet white dude guilt.
So do you feel like there are, especially in Tough Mothers, the second Rejected Princesses book, but are there any rejected princesses that you stumbled across who are like, this is the spiritual twin of my mother?
Any of them that like were real survivors that just worked and worked and worked and worked and worked and just had a million lives. I kind of see bits and pieces of my mom in. There's a woman that's one of the early chapters of Tough Mothers named Vera Peters, who's a Canadian oncologist who made Hodgkin's lymphoma treatable and basically got a form of breast cancer treatment that wasn't a radical mastectomy. She basically made breast cancer treatable without mutilating someone's body. In both cases, she did an enormous amount, like decades of research, and presented findings and had people be like, oh, but you're just a woman. Like, literally, they would be like, go back to Toronto and do your woman's work.
Oh, my God.
And then, like, 10 years later be like, actually, you were right.
Oh, wow.
I really like reading about her. I'm like, oh yeah, that's mom. And she was like, I mean, she wasn't a hellion or anything. Like you look at pictures of her, she's like perfectly like coiffed hair and like just looks the full part of like the, you know, 50s, 60s housewife. Just a neat as you please, like, you know, would make dinner, always be home with the kids and whatever. But she was a fighter. And I see that in my mom.
Cool. Do you, I mean, in all your research, did you have any stories with kind of going back to the idea of rough edges that are so often filed off? Did you find any stories that you thought you understood and then you discovered something new about them that was like, holy crap?
Oh, man. Josephine Baker. A lot of people really, for very good reason, kind of idolize her. It's hard to really explain how big a deal Josephine Baker was at the time. I mean, she was basically like Michael Jackson and Madonna and Angelina Jolie all rolled into one, like times 10. She was the most famous black person, I think, in the world, certainly the wealthiest or way up there. Just a huge, huge deal. She was also just a nightmare to the people around her.
Really?
I had a real hard time sympathizing with her by the end because the best book that I was able to find about her interviewed a whole lot of people that were that had interacted with her in some way, and was all the people that she'd left behind, that she'd really just sort of been a wrecking ball through their lives, because she got to do whatever she wanted to do, but she was not real thoughtful to the people around her. She had a real deep kind of unsatiable hunger. It was a real difficult thing to write about, because she's very important to a lot of people. But
yeah, I mean, you're like besmirching a legacy type thing,
right? But I started viewing the entire thing from the point of view of the people she'd left behind, and like I had a real hard time sympathizing with her. I was enormously worried when the first book came out that people were really going to take me to task.
Yeah.
Thankfully nobody has, but like I was about ready to have a meltdown, because I knew a lot of people hold Josephine Baker super dear.
Yeah.
But everyone I research has got something interesting, something new about them that I'd never known about. You dig deep enough, and like everybody's a person.
Right. Yeah, I that's what I value so much about this. Again, the kind of bloodshed or bad breakups or all the things, you know. It's like, again, women are people. And
right.
People be crazy.
Right.
So in terms of, so we got these two books, and is Rejected Princesses, the website, still ongoing?
Ongoing. The next one, I'll have another entry out probably next Friday or so.
Oh, wow.
That'll be about the one of the daughters of Genghis Khan.
Oh.
Who actually stood up to him.
What?
Yeah, it was kind of an amazing story where she'd been married off to this tribe to sort of get them over on the Mongols' side. They ended up rebelling, and like she ran away, and then Genghis Khan is like, I am going to murder all of them, and she's like, Dad, no. He's like, I'm gonna kill them all. No, Dad, fine, I'll just kill the assassins and their families and their families' families. And they're like, no, Dad, you can kill the assassins, nobody else.
Oh, wow.
Fine.
I like the way that you brought that to life.
And that's basically what she was.
Yeah.
That's given her age and everything at the time. That's pretty much, I think, how it went.
Wow. So you've got these two books out, and so I would love to, like, if you're willing to share, like, what do you think is next for you in terms of these kinds of projects?
I mean, well, we'll see how the second one does. I have a massive list of like probably upwards of 3,000 women at this point to cover. I can't keep at this forever.
Sure.
It doesn't pay well enough to cover the bills. I've been fortunate enough to keep at it for quite some time, but there will come a time where I can't bring someone else on into this tornado of craziness. I can't pay them well enough. It seems unconscionable to take on unpaid labor. So I'm going to keep at this for some time, but it may end up becoming more of my side deal, or I may pass it off to someone. Before I call it, like, totally hang up my hat, I am seriously contemplating a way to open source my big research list and just give that to everyone, make it publicly accessible.
Nice.
But before any of that, I'd love to do another book. I've been doing all these comics online that the publishing industry doesn't really seem to want a lot to do with, which I don't get. I mean, comics don't make a lot of money, but that I may do a Kickstarter for and see how that goes later in the year.
So similar stories but different format? Or
yeah, if you look online, I've been... so the books are like, here's one picture and like 2-3 pages of text. Online, I've been doing this sort of like a webcomic type format that's part like almost infographic or like medieval manuscript meets a comic book.
Oh yeah, the one of the Japanese woman who came to the United States.
Stematsu Oyama.
Yeah.
She had like 7 different names, but that's the one she ended with. So that's one of these, but I've got several hundred pages worth of comics at this point. So I could just press publish on it tomorrow. I'd want to clean it all up first, because I knock those things out for the web, and there's a lot of little like stuff that could definitely be better. But yeah, I'd do sort of a remastered version of that as a Kickstarter, and maybe have a couple of those out, and aim those at a younger market that doesn't like to read these giant thick books.
Right. Well, what I did like about the Rejected Princesses format in the book too is you did have these kind of icons that shared like kind of like content warnings things for people who might be reading these to their daughters or sons, and trying to figure out the appropriate age limit for some of the stories, because obviously, like you said, many of the stories are very adult in their nature, but some of the stories are actually great for little ones to hear about. So I like that you were able to code it so that people could find something in all the stories if they could.
Yeah, the entire thing is not arranged alphabetically. It's arranged by maturity rating. So it starts out sort of PG rated, and then like a handful of R at the back, but most of it's on the order of like Greek mythology. But everybody's kids are different, and I'm not going to talk down to any of them. So I no matter what, I'm not going to change up the sort of verbiage I use, the level of vocabulary. I'm going to talk how I'm going to talk, and people can, if it's a really young reader, maybe they'll be looking up words. Maybe it'll help them learn things. I don't know. Yeah. All I know is that that's the book that I want, and hopefully other people will want it too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. We had been talking briefly about kind of, and this is, I feel like this is an odd question how to phrase it, because like, what about the men? Which is not what I mean by any chance, but I feel like what's really, I encountered this as a sex educator, of that because of, patriarchy and all the things that have, all the various forces that have constrained women for so long. As women start to become more vocal and start to learn things, there's a lot of focus on certain things. There's a lot of focus right now on female sexuality because it's been ignored or denigrated for so long, which I think is a really good thing. But I think I also see in sex education a lot of men have a lot of questions. Oh, yeah. But there are very few people talking to them because it's kind of a back burner situation. And masculine pleasure is often considered kind of like taken for granted.
Right.
Which is an interesting situation. So I have to wonder, in terms of your ideas of masculinity and the kinds of role models that you want to see for boys and men, do you find yourself attracted to stories that are lesser told among men too?
So I do have a small burn list of rejected princes, but that's a harder thing. There's very few stories of historical men that I think are overly surprising. In history, because men have kind of had social license to do whatever. There's plenty of stories of historical trans men that are really fascinating because you go back to the 1800s or something, you're oh, I wouldn't expect that to be happening. But in terms of finding stories that deal with, I think, the really difficult issues that men are not good at dealing with, and I think that it's much easier to find someone who's yes, I'm brave, I stood down a tank or whatever, than find someone who did some really difficult emotional work or found a way to talk to his loved ones, or was a resource for those around him, and that's written down in an accessible way. That's not there. That's a huge missing piece in terms of role models for men. I've been thinking about this a lot of if Princesses is the book that I wrote that I wish my mom had had as a kid, what is the book that I wish I'd had as a kid? What's the role model I didn't have? You think of non-toxic men, and you ask people, and most often the response that people get or give me is Mr. Rogers. Yeah. Sometimes Barack Obama, sometimes Mr. Miyagi. None of those are what a 14-year-old boy wants to be. When they're growing up, they want to be, a superhero. They want to be wisecracking and sort of the life of the party and just, overly powerful. They want to be Deadpool. They want to be Iron Man. They want to be James Bond. And James Bond's especially pernicious. That dude's just a broken sociopath.
Yes.
But he's somehow the pinnacle of cool for some people. Right. He's Sinatra with a gun, he's a little dated now, but nevertheless, the Marvel template of the wisecracking Tony Stark character, I don't think is that much better.
No, he's an alcoholic, especially in the comics.
Oh yeah, devil in a bottle.
Yeah.
But I want to figure out what's the role model I wish I'd had that could go toe to toe with that. That
can still be sexy or attractive or cool.
Right. Yeah. Right. Because, these folk who've grown up, Picard is amazing. Picard is a great role model. Picard is not exactly like the crazy, sexy, cool, picking up chicks kind of guy. That's Kirk. And Kirk is a broken shamble of a man at a certain point, you know?
Well, it does kind of speak to this idea of like what women find sexy versus what men think women find sexy.
Right.
And so that's also, again, a very comic book conversation of like that the women drawn in comic books are male sexual fantasies. The men drawn in comic books are male power fantasies. Yeah. And a lot of times men will say, no, they're not. They're female sexual fantasies. It's like, no, when you think of female sexual fantasies, you get Sandman. You get David Bowie in a number of his incarnations. You get these like far less suave, far less... I mean, that's like Loki as a sexual hero. I mean, the fact that there are as many women thirsting over Loki as there are Thor is a fascinating tale about female sexuality. Yeah. And I think it would be interesting to hear more from, that kind of exploration into what about that kind of trope is interesting or sexy to women, and how men can maybe not necessarily craft themselves as gods of mischief, but as, not necessarily these muscle-bound god types or these wisecracking alcoholics.
Right. I think there's got to be something out there that's an in-between, because, I certainly wouldn't be comfortable molding myself after, say, the Loki or Bowie stereotype, or those molds of, I love Bowie, I love Prince. I can't pull that off. That's not me.
Don't underestimate yourself.
I mean, Jason. It'd be fun, but I know my limits, and that's just not me. But I also, then what's left, I'm not Stark, so I'm trying to think of it in terms of the challenges that these characters are consistently put up against are all kind of external for the most part. Or if they are internal, it's this really boring Luke Skywalker, accept your lineage kind of deal of you're really a prince and you've been lost. And here's what the world really owes you. And that, I think that's an entirely pernicious sort of use of the hero's journey in and of itself. What interests me more is finding someone who's maybe able to, heft cars over his head and lay waste to armies. But what does that dude struggle with? I'm willing to bet it's like having any sort of talk at all with a woman. That has any sort of depth. I bet that dude's able to wisecrack like crazy. But beyond that, beyond doing these great big feats, is that dude any good at doing laundry? Can he cook?
Can he hold you after you had a really bad day?
what does that dude plan for not the first date, but for the fifth date? How does that dude resolve conflicts? These are not big sexy things in and of themselves, these specific conflicts, but you could come up with situations that are that in a metaphorical context, where it's that exact conflict, but is somehow played out with different beings taking a personal demon or something, taking that the shape of that and then working it out through that, and that way it'd be a lot more visually and viscerally interesting. But really it's all an internal conflict just playing out externally.
Wow. I mean, that's speaking to where I'm at with my career now too, is that I'm very focused on for sex education, people who come to my classes or buy my books, they know what they don't know. And those people are easy to reach. The people that I feel like I need to reach as part of my mission is the people who don't know what they don't know. And I feel like
that's a tough one to hit.
Right. But that's where I feel like story helps, right? When they think they're just going to watch a TV show to be entertained or read a book just to kind of get a laugh out of it, and they end up learning something or starting to examine the world in a slightly different way, that is where I feel like the real power is in storytelling. Yeah. And that's definitely what I would like to see myself doing, is to help kind of move the needle in that way. by kind of, finding these back doors into people's psyches through story.
Yeah, sugarcoat the pill kind of deal.
Yeah.
It's a tricky thing. Like, people get real touchy if they feel like they're being preached to. But if you, like, lay it in there real subtly, they won't realize it necessarily.
Yeah.
But especially nowadays, people are so on the lookout for anything that they consider to be propagandizing or like, this is social justice bullshit or whatever it is.
Right.
But those are the people that need to be reached the most.
Right.
At least those are the people I'm most interested in reaching, because I think that in the current crop of things that's being made and where a lot of the attention and focus is, it's reaching markets that haven't been reached before. It's reaching, non-cishet white dudes and telling stories that haven't been told, and that's great. I am not the person to be shepherding those stories. I shouldn't be. Like, it really should be like, creators of color or whatever. What I would like to do is reach out to this vast group of men who feel like they're being left behind, who have tremendous anxiety, who have no roadmap. And there are certainly sectors of society that are very loud and like have very serious and well-earned grievances that have no sympathy to that. And I don't want to demand sympathy of people. I don't want to say, no, this is your problem, because it's been the problem for all of human civilization practically. Like, the cishet white dudes have in some way made it their problem. I want to do something to look after 13-year-old me. Like, in an alternate reality, I never shook off being a shitty, ignorant dude. I've been doing a lot of retracing my steps and trying to figure out how did I avoid that timeline. How can I distill that in a piece of art that will speak to someone else without them getting riled up that I'm just virtue signaling or something like that. I think that's where my energy sort of in the future is better spent, because I think I can only do this for so long before, like, if it gets too big, it'll be all about the messenger and not the message. And I'm not going to, like, princesses wouldn't be able to survive that. I just don't think it would. So that's where a lot of my brain is at right now.
Wow. Heavy stuff.
Yeah. This is what I talk about with my therapist. Thanks for the freebie therapy session.
My pleasure. I'll charge you later. Awesome. Well, so where can people find your work, if they want to follow along, if they want to get deeper into Rejected Princesses?
So rejectedprincesses.com is sort of the mother lode for everything, but I know a lot of people don't go to websites anymore. It's old fashioned.
Really?
Whatever. I'm from the 80s.
I'm so
I don't
old.
care. Right? Yeah. I'm on Facebook if you don't mind having all of your information sucked away by Mark Zuckerberg as Rejected Princesses. I'm on Tumblr, Rejected Princesses, Instagram, Rejected Princesses, and then Twitter as Jason Porath, because Rejected Princesses is too long a handle for Twitter. What you gonna do? I keep hoping that they'll fix that. They'll be like, oh yeah, you can have longer handles now, but I don't think they're ever going to. Instead, they're just going to be like, you can have 5,000 character tweets now. We solved it. Yay, everybody's happy.
One of the things, by the way, about the website that I really do appreciate is the map.
Oh, yeah.
And that was, so for people who are interested in exploring like different regions and different stories from different areas, it's very easy to do on rejectedprincesses.com, which I think is super cool. And again, from the Disney perspective of a white girl who grew up in Ohio, like, to be able to be like, oh, like, who are the rejected princesses in sub-Saharan Africa? Who are the rejected princesses in, the Amazon region? Like, that stuff's so cool. And so I really like to be, my favorite part is just kind of hovering over and seeing what stories I can read. And so I recommend for people who are new to the Rejected Princesses thing to go to the website, because it's really cool to be able to do that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, for the second book, I actually, the inside cover and the back cover have a map on there that
cool.
lists out like, you know, which chapter is where. So you should be able to look it up real easy like that.
Nice.
As a final sign off to show just how much attention to detail I put into this, the map that is in there is not a standard Mercator projection map, because if anybody's seen The West Wing, you know what I'm about to talk about. The way that they sort of we translate. The globe is spherical and it has to be translated onto a 2D surface to be a map. So you have to shift things around a little bit because it's never going to line up completely right. The standard map that is out there is called the Mercator Projection Map, and it doesn't do a good job of accurately representing relative sizes. So like Africa is way bigger than it actually appears on there. Germany is way smaller, like all that stuff. So
the United States is kind of centered and bigger than it actually is.
Right.
Yeah.
So I hand traced a Hobo-Dyer projection map that actually has it looks enough like a Mercator that like people aren't going to be like, wait, what? But it actually has proper sizes. Moreover, and this is something that the first printing didn't get right, but it was something that I really wanted to do. I have the fold of the pages, the book fold, land on the Atlantic Ocean in the up front, but on the back, because everything's flipped, I wanted to actually continue having it and flip it so it was south up instead of north up.
Nice.
Because why is north always got to be up? But sadly, that didn't come to pass for the first printing. I'm going to try and get it corrected for the second printing.
Nice.
So it should be south up on the back.
Wow, you think like the printer's like, oh, they made a mistake, I'll correct it for them?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't the printers.
Oh, okay.
It was just a miscommunication inside of my publisher.
I see.
Yeah.
Cool.
No biggie.
Well, awesome. Jason Porath, thank you so much for talking to me. This was a lovely conversation.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yay.
It's great being on.
Yay. And that is it for my interview with Jason Porath. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked what he had to say, please go send him some love on any of the various links that he dropped in at the end of our interview. Meanwhile, right before I let you go, I had been in the habit of, on prior episodes, sharing something that I thought was kind of artgasm worthy at the top of the show. Maybe a link to an article or some piece of art that I engaged with that I thought was worthy. I figure it probably makes more sense to add that to the end of the show so that you can kind of take it and search for it after you're done listening to Artgasm. I don't know. It seems like a good idea. So I want to share something with you that I just watched the other night. Now, everyone on my Facebook page, all my friends, pretty much everyone I know has been freaking out about this show on Netflix. It's a special. It's a, I guess, quote unquote comedy special by Hannah Gadsby, a Tasmanian comedian, and the show is called Nanette, Nanette. From the way it was advertised, the way it looked, it felt very much like a comedy stand-up show, which was cool. So I didn't really feel like I needed to rush to watch it. But the other night, my partner and I were trying to figure out what to watch, and we're like, oh, I'd heard good things. Let me tell you, this show blew my fucking mind. I can't sing its praises high enough. Hannah Gadsby is an extraordinarily talented person, extraordinarily thoughtful and articulate, and I'm at a loss for words. I just know that the show will be with me for a very long time. I will be chewing on it when I have the stomach for it. I will rewatch it. It is very funny. It is a stand-up special, and it is also harrowing. The twists and turns that Hannah goes on in this piece are extraordinary, and you I felt incredibly safe, at the same time incredibly challenged by the stuff that she was sharing. It transcends comedy, it transcends stand-up, and turns into storytelling, it turns into performance, it turns into something. It takes what, we can often consider these very standard ideas of what makes a stand-up special, and it blasts them through the stratosphere of intersectional art. I'm so amazed with how she worked the audience and how she held the audience and how she held herself. in front of the audience, in front of a very large room of people. It was a really extraordinary piece. And it's hard. There's some really scary stuff that she talks about, and there's some really painful stuff that she talks about. And she does it in an elegant, thoughtful, and intentional way. And I cannot recommend it highly enough. And because, as everyone in America at least is required to have a Netflix subscription, I know that you have one. But if you do not have a Netflix subscription, this would be a really good thing to go ahead and sign up for that free trial for, because it is something special. I have no doubt we will see Hannah Gadsby doing a lot of really amazing things in the world of art, whether or not it's comedy. She's got a voice and she's got a brain that need to be shared with the world. I think it's really, really valuable. So Hannah Gadsby's in the Net. It's on Netflix. Go check it out. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening to Artgasm. As always, thank you for sharing it. Thank you for spreading the word. I've got new listeners every week, and that makes me so happy, but I want more. I want more. I need to be seen and heard, people. But I want to be able to keep having these conversations. And so that requires people to be engaged and helping share these conversations with the world. So tweet and share on Instagram and all the things. I post on Instagram. I'm at Allison_Moon on Instagram. I'm at Hey Allie Moon on Twitter. I'm at girl6101.com. I'm at artgasmcast.com because apparently, Allison Moon is not as uncommon of a name as I thought it was, and there are a lot of Allison Moons, so I had to have a different permutation of my name for pretty much everything I'm online for. So, yeah. So, Artgasmcast, Twitter, Instagram, all the things. If you have questions, if you have thoughts, you can always email me at artgasmcast@gmail.com. If you are a Patreon subscriber, I will notice you faster. So consider becoming a Patreon subscriber. And when you reach out to me, I will be there for you. All right. Until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.